Hello, I'm Andrew Christofferson. I'm a technical artist over at Bungie, and I wanted to share with you a strategy I like to use for sharing attributes among controls for a rig. A lot of times you'll have a limb where you're going to do a simple IKFK setup, and there's always the question of where do I put the switch attribute, an attribute can only really exist on one object in Maya, and a lot of times we're fighting like the ability to expose it in any state because usually you're switching the visibility of any of your control chains. The FK turns off when the IK is working most of the time, and you want to be able to have access to the switch attribute at any time. So sometimes you'll put it on the pedestal, the root control of the rig, or you'll put it on some extra control that'll just be sitting there with the limb. But I have a different strategy that I like to use, and it's using the instance of a control shape. And I'll walk you through what I mean by that. So right now, we just have this simple joint chain in here. It's kind of emulating what we would have for an arm of some kind. Got our root joint down below and shoulder, elbow, wrist, and end effector. And then from there, we can rig this thing as we see fit. Here's some code that I've written before that kind of builds a simple, well, not that simple. It's got some stretch and other attributes, but it's basically an IKFK arm. And when we run this, we end up with a control. And this is the FK control right here. You can rotate it around, and as you walk down is just simple FK, but there's also an IK chain here, but it's not exposed to us right now. If we look in the channel box, there's no attributes on any of these controls, and if we dig down to the outliner, you can see why, and that's because we have generated, wait, where am I? Do not touch. We're going to unhide this group, and then, where is it? There's the instance, the FK-IK switch control. So on this shape, when we select it, you can see in the channel box that we have all these attribute controls in here, and this is where our switch is. We're able to switch over to IK, and we get our pull vector and IK control. And we have templating, which allows us to template the unused controls and switch the visibility of unused controls, which is handy. So a bunch of extra stuff that doesn't specifically interface with any one control. It's actually for the entire component. So we have stretch controls down here and whatnot, a bunch of nonsense. And we want this available to the animator whenever they're interacting with us, no matter if they're in the IK state of the rig or the FK. And so there's a couple strategies, but the one we're going to address today is instancing. And how I do that is this call within here is like a simple way that I've set it up. We'll just have this function here, and it's called add instance to control. So what we do is we use the pm.instance call, and we're able to instance a shape and share it among a bunch of transforms, so that as any transform can have multiple shapes within it, it can also have a shared instance of a shape that might be on a central transform, which is how we're going to use it. So we instance the curve out, and then we get the shape from that instance, and then parent it into our control. And we're just going to iterate through all the controls and add that to them. And then once you start to select any of these controls, you will now see that we have the instance shape underneath our transform for our IK control. We can switch it back and forth. We're back to the FK. We can select an FK control, and look, our attributes are still here. No matter what state, no matter what control we're selecting, we get the global attributes for any of for the component. These are the component level controls, so we want them on all of the controls. So we'll select over here. We're going to turn on stretch. We're going to turn on IK, and then we can pull our control out and stretch is working. We're going to turn the upper limb stretch up and down, and we can select the pull vector and be adjusting the pull vector, and then turn off stretch at that point because we're like, we don't need that, and and it still works. It's the same attributes. Maya is just we've linked all of our nodes to this central transform shape object that we're putting all the attributes on, and then we're just instancing that shape across all these transforms. I misspoke earlier. We're not putting the actual attributes on the transform. The transform just holds our specific shape that we're instancing everywhere. So it's really handy and clean is what I really like about it, is like you're able to keep all your attributes and name them these simple things, and then they are shared across all of these shapes. One of the drawbacks is it is, as you can see over here in the channel box, it's within the shapes column. So that can be a little tricky because you can have multiple shapes in there, and by default in Maya, when you have show in channel box, only the last shape really automatically opens up. And for a while, I was adding them in kind of in whatever order, and animators would have to open it up. But as you can see here, when it's the last shape added to the order, then it opens up and it's always there available in the channel box. So I would suggest, if you're going to use a tactic like this, that you add your selection shapes to your controls first, and then add the attribute shape second, the instance shape. And that way you'll always have it displaying in the channel box. And then also name all your attributes the same. And then when you select multiple controls, even if they're for other component systems, they will all display, because as long as the attributes share the name, then they will all display in the channel box. And you can switch a bunch of rig controls all at the same time, and even they're on different system, they'll still display the attribute. You can switch it once, it just switches on all of them. So those are the few things that I've learned as I've experimented with a system like this. We don't currently use it at Bungie, but I think it's strong, and it of course doesn't force you into making extra controls on the shape or on the component itself. Some people put like a gear or something, or put it down the pedestal, like I said, but this just allows you to put it on all the controls that are going to want to interface with this system. And yeah, it's I think it's really cool, and you should use it. There's more stuff changing in the Autodesk side with their custom setup for their actual control shapes that they're starting to like push more. So maybe some of this functionality with different attributes on the same control is going to become easier in the future, but this is a current workaround that I think is really handy, and you should utilize it in your rig if you also like it. Anyways, thanks, hope that's helpful, and I'd like to do more of these short tutorial things, so see you in the next one.